I'd like to welcome everyone to the celebration of our beloved Lotfi Zadeh, and of course, as a combination of LA traffic and some of the traditional type things, and the fact that we use fuzzy logic to arrive at a meeting rather than the crisp time, we basically expect to have a fuller audience today as time goes on. But in any case, I would like to thank everyone for coming, and I would like to say a few words about before I start the program. I'd like to emphasize that this whole program has been sponsored by Fanni Union, and we will have a presentation by their representative, and of course Global Energy Network that I'm involved in, as well as APSIH and the Persian Academic and Cultural Student Organization from USC. So we want to thank all these sponsors, and I also would like to thank a few people who did a lot of work behind the scene. Dr. Nima Jafari, who happens to be my ex-PhD student, but he is one of the officials of Fanni right now. Cyrus Ashrafi is showing his real work right now. Nilufar, Hussein, and Amir. So I want to thank all of them for their work. So basically, and of course, I also want to thank all the speakers that we will see, but they will introduce themselves, so I don't need to go through. I have limited time, and although I've been told by Norm, or Lotfi's son, who honored us to be here, he told me that he will lend me about 4 or 5 minutes of his time, so I can go longer. So thank you for that. I had the pleasure of knowing Lotfi for at least 30 years, maybe more. And this is actually a picture we have taken as when we were in a Persian restaurant in the Bay Area with his beloved wife, Faye. And these are the words that come to my mind when I think of Lotfi. He was a truly visionary person, and he was pioneering, aside from fuzzy logic, he has pioneered many other things, the system theory and so on, and computing with words. He was a true teacher, and I really personally owe a lot of things I know to him, both from his publications, but from personal contacts. He was a true scientist, and he was a really humble and down-to-earth person. I mean, that is really so beautiful about him. Unlike some of the things that we heard last couple of days about some politicians, he never would have said things like that. That I'm smart and great and so on. And of course, he was extremely caring, and most of all, he was extremely involved and caring for his beloved wife, Faye. And in short, he was a wonderful human being. And I really feel strongly about that, and we are really celebrating his life here. We had the pleasure of having Lotfi Zadeh at USC many times. This is actually from our Global Energy Network website, one of the news items back in September of 2014. And this is, he came here and gave a lecture guest lecturer for one of my courses. And he was really so gracious to do that. And this is a picture at the end of the class, took with all of my students there. And you can go to our website and see all this in detail. Before that, about in 2010, he also came to USC and gave another talk on computing with words. And again, he never stopped inspiring all the young generation. My focus today will be what he contributed to the energy and exploration and production. These are some of the books that make a lot of mention of his work on exploration. Some of them he has written introductions to these books. And next, and these are some of the more recent books, and as a matter of fact, the cover of one of those books, the second from the right, actually includes his name, that I was honored to work with him on this book, titled, I think I remember, Automatic Forward. So anyway, I was honored to work with him on this book and in connection with computation, soft computing for reservoir characterization. So he has left his mark on many, many different disciplines. And the ones, of course, I'm talking about is oil and gas, but if you go have a camera, fuzzy logic is used in that camera. If you take a train, especially in Japan, fuzzy logic fuzzy systems are used in that whole thing. If you go to a building with air conditioning, perhaps right now, the air conditioning system is using fuzzy control. So he has made immense impact on many, many aspects of basically everyone's everyday life, including, of course, the scientific community. Next. So since I won't have much time, and of course I don't want to start going into details of some of these technical details, but he has, this is a seismic data set, and in this particular work, we use fuzzy membership to find quote-unquote good hydrocarbon probability. So we can take site data and say, okay, where is the potential likely place for having good prospect, and we drill there. So fuzzy logic has played a significant role in making sure that we can do these things in a profound and scientifically valid way. Next one. This is another one using fuzzy membership characteristics. And you can see where potential hydrocarbon might be. Next one. This is a recent, well, not so recent, but a paper by another person who published it in Oil and Gas Journal. Oil and Gas Journal usually publishes things that are very practical, not esoteric things. And we see here that, again, fuzzy logic has been used to find oil and gas and correlating so-called well-log data with the seismic data. Next. This is actually another result of using fuzzy so-called bank control that is used for fuzzy water steam flooding. It's a process that you, especially for old oil fields, you can use steam flooding to improve production, and the method to use fuzzy logic has been quite effective, and we recently have actually filed a patent in that area. Next one. one of my students was doing some summer work in Chevron. She's sitting at the end of this room. And she used fuzzy kriging, which is a method to extrapolate information spatially. And she, at Chevron, she worked with another fuzzy enthusiast, Dr. Andrea Popa, who will be here later. He has a class. So anyway, it was an effective work for actually an oil company, not in an academic environment. So these are just a few examples of how the extent of the impact of Lotfi's work, not only in other areas that other people might talk about, but just focusing on energy issues. Next. Now, if you know or remember, John Lennon has a famous song, Imagine. And he says, imagine there were no borders. I personally actually subscribe to that mentality. Of course, unfortunately, the real world is not as pure and as idealistic as John Lennon imagined. Now, next one. Lotfi was more pragmatic. So now, how about a world with fuzzy boundaries? And we have already seen examples of that. Aside from porous border that we have in the US, European Union or other things that they are sort of fuzzy boundaries. So that this is basically Lotfi's futuristic view of what things might be. So, next one. I think, in short, we have lost a great mind, but his legendary ideas will be with us forever. So I want to ask everyone take a 1 minute silence in his memory, and then we move on. All right, thank you. So with that, I would like to invite Zada to come and say a few words memorizing his father.
Is it on?
Yes.
It's on. So I'm going to keep this very short and sweet and light. I'd first like to tell all of you, I assume some of you are aware of this, but probably my father's best friend was a fellow named Richard Bellman. He's kind of a legendary applied mathematician who I believe spent most of his career at USC. And I'd like to say some of the things that my father didn't do and didn't say. He never said, "I'm very intelligent." He never got drunk. The closest I recall him getting drunk was actually, there's a picture of him with Richard Bellman and some woman. I don't remember if it was my mother or not. I think it might have been. I just don't remember. But the picture is around somewhere. My father never went to a football game. He never went to a baseball or a basketball game. He never went to a strip club. So what I'm trying to say here is that he was really a very hard-working guy. Pardon? So it was pretty much, he's either working at home or he's working at the office. What else can I tell you? Some of the other people that he admired greatly are, you may or may not recognize these names, Herb Robbins, who was a statistician, spent some time at Columbia. He admired Richard Courant, Claude Shannon, Charlie Towns. another name that I'm missing here. But he did have some problems when he created fuzzy sets, as a lot of people know. There was a certain degree of kind of opposition to the idea. And so I remember when I was taking a computer course at Berkeley one long time ago, that the course was being taught by Professor Harrison, Michael Harrison. And normally when you walk into a course, they teach you about the subject that they're supposed to be, explaining. But Mike Harrison started talking about my dad and how he had created all these problems in the department. It was a very unusual situation. So I don't really have too much else to say, except that my father really helped his students, which I think is very important. And I think he was a very modest guy, actually. I don't think he really thought all that much of himself. Obviously he thought he was smart, but he thought there were a lot of people that were just as smart or smarter than he.
Thank you.
Was that short enough for you?
Very good. Thank you. All right, so the next order of business is to have a short musical work, live classical music performance. So please go on.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having us, and I'd like to thank PACSA for hosting us, as well as Cyrus for giving us the idea to invite us all. So we have a number of pieces for you all. The first is, of course, Vivaldi's movement from the Four Seasons. This is the second movement of Winter, although with the current weather, I thought it would have been more apropos to perform a movement of Summer instead. In the second movement, Vivaldi here is talking as a contrast to the stormy outer movements of Winter. The text for this is to evoke more of a crackling fireplace warmth instead of anything too horrible going on outside. Vocalese is actually supposed to be a warm-up for vocalists.
Towards the end of the 18th and 19th centuries, they progressed from towards etudes towards things that were actually accompanied by pianists and other instruments. In this respect, Rachmaninoff perhaps produced one of the most well-known of these vocal pieces.
performing for you is by a French composer named Leclerc. He was a Baroque composer, and he wrote 6 tonal sonatas for violin duet. We're going to be performing the 5th sonata, the Allegro movement, Gavotte, and Presto. I hope you enjoy it. written by the composer Gluck, but it was transcribed for violin and piano by Chrysler, but we're transcribing it again for 2 violins.
Thank you very much, everybody. We are
Thank you so much. We would have loved this lesson until 11 at night, but that was great. Thank you much.
Thank you so much again.
The next speaker is Dr. Mohammad Reza Rajati, and I would like to invite him to come and say a few words about his experience with Zada and connection between probability, Zada and Rumi.
Hello everybody. So I don't know how quick I can go over the slides. Let me first start from the motivation for this presentation. This is the Facebook page of Professor Lotfi Zadeh. I'm not really sure who created it or whatever, but it has useful information and interesting news about him. A few days after he passed away, I saw a few posts like this so this was the news about his burial and stuff. And an Iranian user of Facebook wrote, he is a very brilliant Iranian scientist. So some other user, it started some kind of argument. If you take a look, someone says Iran, someone laughs, someone says he was Azerbaijani, then someone says even goes further and says there isn't such an Iranian nation in the world, and then the admin of the page responds, and he's in Azerbaijan now in his motherland. So this is about, this motivated me to give this presentation. Well, most of you know much of the information that I'm going to give you, but I'm going to go over a very short biography of Lotfi. He was born in 1921 in Baku, Azerbaijan, former Soviet Union, to a Russian Jewish mother who was a physician, and an Iranian Muslim father, Rahim Zadeh, both of whom were living in Iran and were Iranian citizens. He stayed in Baku until the age of 10. Actually, I heard from him his memories, his interesting memories from his primary school in Baku, and then he moved into Tehran, Iran, and studied in Alborz College, which was run by Presbyterians. And he himself, actually, at USC, mentioned that it was very hard to move from a school in which talking about God was banned to a school run by Christian priests in which he had to pray every morning to God. It's too much for a third grader. So he studied in the Alborz College, still there in Tehran, one of the most famous colleges in Tehran. And then he sat for national university exams and placed third, and went to the Faculty of Engineering in the University of Tehran. Then, fast forward, he immigrated to the United States in 1943, married to Zadeh, who was Jewish. I actually met her once, and I have a very good memory. She started singing in Persian for me. And then he studied electrical engineering at MIT and Columbia. And very fast, actually, in his, I believe, 30s, he became a prominent figure in electrical engineering. Most of us have heard about fuzzy logic, but his earlier contributions without even fuzzy logic, in my opinion, would make us sit here again and talk about his contributions and celebrate his life. He was a really significant engineer of the 20th century. So, according to many of these traditions, Zada can be considered any of those. He can be considered Russian, Jewish, Muslim, Iranian, Azerbaijani, American, and as far as I know, he spoke some of those languages at least. He here at USC mentioned that he reads newspapers in Persian. I saw him speak Russian, and I think he spoke German, blah, blah, blah. Not sure though. So, this story reminds me of a very famous poet called Rumi. So I want to show you what Zadeh has in common with Rumi. So Rumi, who was Rumi? He was born in, there's controversy, either in current Tajikistan or Afghanistan, in a small village, probably on the border. He was born in the 13th century and passed away in the 13th century. He was a poet, a mystic, theologian, an Islamic scholar, many other things, and Sufi. And his map of life it's in my opinion, is a significant figure. It spans 2,500 miles. He fled from Genghis Khan's raid. He fled from Genghis Khan's raid with his family when he was, I think, about 9, I'm sorry. And he traveled to Uzbekistan, current Uzbekistan. The borders are kind of man-made and recent. Then to Iran. He studied in Syria in his 20s, in Aleppo and Damascus, and then ended up in a city in current Turkey called Konya. Some of you may have even visited that city. And he spent 4 or 5 decades of his life in Konya. So this is kind of the conservative map of influence of Rumi, although I think he's a universal poet. Turks celebrate him, respect him, and have annual ceremonies in his honor. So this is a statue of him in Turkey. So the most significant thing that happened to Rumi was his encounter with a wandering mystic. They say he was not even literate, called Shams. So it was in 1244, I think he was around 37 years old. He had many students. He taught philosophy, or whatever you can call it. That in those times things were not that clear. And he was already a preacher, a scholar, and very famous. And all of a sudden, he fell in love with someone. So there's controversy what type of love it was. Was he his disciple? Was it even a platonic love? Was it further than, we don't know. And there's always controversy. There are books written about this. But we know that he was in love with Shams. And so during his encounter with Shams, he wrote 3,000 sonnets to him, to God, to some of his students, and he has become, according to BBC Culture, the best-selling poet in the United States. So there's a whole report on BBC about Rumi. So there's a controversy about his identity and origin as well. So his poems are mostly in Persian, but I have read poems from him in Turkish, Arabic, and even Greek. He has a small Greek sonnet. And he was born in today's Afghanistan. He lived in Uzbekistan, Iran, Syria, and Turkey, current Turkey, in the Byzantine Empire. That's why he's called Rumi. That means Roman. Although, so it's almost forgotten that he lived in the Roman Empire. And each of these cultures and nations call him their own. But let's listen to these two people, what they say about themselves. Let's ask Zadeh and Rumi what they think about their identities. Actually, there's something in common. He always reminded me of Rumi. And so this is the original poem. This is one of these masterpieces, in my opinion. So I take your permission to read the Persian part that I'm referring to, and then I'm going to translate it. It says, so it's to Shams, actually, but they kind of say that he was so much in love with him that he was actually seeing no barrier between himself and Shams. So he's kind of talking to himself. So he says, گفتم ز کجایی تو تسخر زده گفته جان نیمیم ز ترکستان نیمیم ز فرغانه نیمیم ز جان و دل نیمیم ز آب و گل نیمی ز لب دریا نیمی همه دردانه گفتم که رفیقی کن با من که منت خویشم گفتا که به نشناسم من خویش بیگانه. Very interesting. This is the translation. I asked, where is thy land? With laughter and a cold hand, he said, half from the Arabian sand and half a heavenly strand, half made of water and clay, half soul and half solar ray, half on the shallow beaches lay, half from the oyster's pearly play. I ask thee to be my friend and change this dividing trend. Reply that I transcend, all divisions in me end. So now I'm quoting Zadeh. When they ask him about his identity, he replies, he was said to be quick to shrug off nationalism, insisting that there are much deeper issues in life, and was quoted as saying in an interview, the question really isn't whether I am American, Russian, Iranian, Azerbaijani, or anything else. I have been shaped by all these people and cultures, and I feel quite comfortable among all of them. And I have witnessed that. Although I didn't meet him so many times, but that was my feeling. I don't know, maybe I'm gonna censor my, do I have more time? 2 minutes? I can do it in 2 minutes. So probability, this is some personal reflection about my interaction with Lotfi. Some of you may know that my advisor was Professor Jerry Mendel. He's gonna give you a talk about the serious stuff about fuzzy logic. So we came up with an idea of working on Zadeh's, some problems posed by Zadeh in my PhD dissertation, and I had to interact with him because there was not so many resources, papers, anything about those problems. There were only a few slides prepared by him. So I had to interact with him to really understand what was going on. And through my interactions, let me show you this email. He kind of gently told me that you don't understand probability. So, and in person he told me take as many courses as possible on advanced courses on probability. And I listened to him, and I was supported very much by Jerry. I actually took a master's in statistics at USC. So Zadeh was always accused of being inventing fuzzy logic because he wanted to have a theory against probability theory. That was I was about to start a postdoc, and the person with whom I wanted to work told that my first homework was this: write a paper that says probability is right and fuzzy logic is wrong, something like that. So it was quite interesting for me that he never asked me to take courses on, I don't know, logic or fuzzy logic or something like that. Actually, he insisted that I take courses on probability. That was some personal reflection. I would like to thank him for his mentorship, and sorry it took longer than I thought. Thank you.
You are a born professor, born teacher.
Actually, I teach probability in this room.
Thank you, Mohammad. So the next course of action is to have some refreshment and break. So let's have a break, some food, and then we come back and look at the real serious stuff. So please come here.
Thank you very much. My My name is Orhan Rustamli. I'm Consul of the Consulate General of Azerbaijan. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Fred, for inviting us to this inspiring, interesting event to commemorate prominent person, Lotfi Zadeh. You know, the more you know about this person, the more you admire him. And that's why this event is very interesting. It was very interesting to listen to our speakers. And I just want to say a few words about his funeral in Azerbaijan. As you may know, Lotfi Zadeh's last will was to be buried in Azerbaijan after his death, and he sent the letter to the president of Azerbaijan, and we, the government, and all the citizens of Azerbaijan were very honored. So he was laid to rest at the first alley of honor in Baku, Azerbaijan. So once again, I would like to thank you for inviting us to this wonderful event.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, I'd like to say a few more words about the funeral ceremony in Azerbaijan. It was a great event, and one of my good friends, Dr. Hafiz Pashayev, who was the ambassador of Azerbaijan to the United States for at least 12-13 years. He played a key role and of course he was introduced to Professor Lotfi Zadeh several times in San Francisco as well as Washington, D.C. And so he was one of the key people who was instrumental in getting this very, very beautiful ceremony. It was attended by the President of Azerbaijan. And you can go to the internet and see some of the very impressive ceremonies that were held in Baku about 40 days ago. So for all those of us who honor 40th day of someone's passing, this memorial actually is quite fitting. But in any case, we appreciate all the work that Azerbaijanis did to honor Lotfi and satisfy his last wish to be buried in Baku, and we appreciate that. And of course, we have Dr. Chillinger here. He is one of the prominent faculty members at USC. And there are many other people that either will be giving a talk or we don't have much time to introduce. So let's just start with the rest of the program. And our next speaker actually happens to be someone very important to me and many others. Jerry Mendel actually was my thesis advisor when I was getting my PhD at USC about 200 years ago. And of course he has the distinction to have three of his students are speakers in this program, believe it or not. Myself and Mohammad, Dr. Rajati, and of course later on Dr. Ashrafi. So you get a record for a number of speakers to be your students in this program. I think Dr. Jerry Mendel will be giving a talk on the impact of fuzzy logical science and engineering, and we appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you. To begin, this is what I dedicated my May 2017 book. I dedicated to Lotfi, and I thought really hard. What can you say about this person who's gotten so many awards? And I remember the famous statement that was made by George Washington, the father of our country, and this is a paraphrasing of that. first in scholarship, first in kindness, and first in the hearts of his colleagues. I think that really summarizes Lotfi Zadeh. To give you an example, in 2007, I had a celebration here for my 70th, and it was in May. In February of that year, Lotfi had his first heart attack, and I never, ever expected him to show up. Fred, you may recognize, he's here in this also. A couple of my other PhD students. So, what I want to do is I want to give you a sense of what I think his major intellectual accomplishments were. And as Fred has already mentioned, Lotfi was already a very famous person in the systems and the control field before he moved into this area. I shouldn't say moved into the area, I should say he invented the area. One of the, there are two items on this list that are kind of close to my heart. Z transforms are even today the bread and butter tool of digital signal processes. He co-invented that with a guy named John Rajati at Columbia University. And then he was very, very instrumental in reformulating or helping to reformulate the control theory field in what's called the state-space perspective. And in fact, that's the book that I first learned state-space stuff. Back in those days, there were no fancy covers. This is what the cover was. And it was published by Zadeh and Desor. Charlie Desor was another pretty well-known control theory guy. And in 1963, this really was the first book that brought everything together about this new and very important approach to control and system theory. However, and this really amazes me, because this control theory stuff is very, very mathematical. That was my original field. And here's a guy at the top of the mountain, so to speak, in this field, and he's troubled. He's troubled by the fact that things are getting too complicated. And I'll show you this quote right away. And he essentially left the control and systems field, and I like to say he wandered in the fuzzy wilderness. And now we've heard about Lotfi's very diverse backgrounds, who claims who. So I say at least Moses had a following when he wandered through the wilderness. Lotfi had nobody, absolutely no one. He invented this field, and I've thought a lot about how did he do it? And I think he did it because he never said a bad thing about anybody or anything. He was open to all ideas. He encouraged people to do things, and that's the only way that you can build a following. If you're critical about people from the beginning, you're not going to have a following, okay? And so he was on the road a lot, and worldwide, and people followed him. He was just a very kind, warm, brilliant individual who drew people to him. So there's a principle that he has espoused, and this is what got him thinking away from the very mathematical approach to modeling things that he was used to in the control and system field. And so let me just read this. It says, as the complexity of a system increases, our ability to make precise and yet significant statements about its behavior diminishes until a threshold is reached beyond which precision and significance or relevance become almost mutually exclusive characteristics. The time he was thinking about this was the time that, don't laugh, people were trying to model the whole world using system theory. A whole group of people doing this. And I think Lotfi looked at this and said, no way. Things are too complicated. Something else is needed. Nothing is so crisp that we can describe it using the mathematics that people are trying to use. So let me just take a minute. You know, you put a professor up here, you got to get a little lecture. So I'm sure that not everybody here even knows what a fuzzy set is. What I want to do is I want to focus on what I think are Zadeh's major intellectual achievements. Okay, there's not going to be any math, but the first is a fuzzy set. So to tell you what a fuzzy set is, I first have to go back and I have to tell you what a regular, classical, crisp set is. So I'm going to do it in terms of an example. Okay, suppose you wanted to characterize warm water, and you knew without any uncertainty the range over which you would call water warm. Okay, then this diagram here shows a degree of similarity to warm water. And in that rectangular well, any temperature you would call warm. End of story. Any temperature outside, to the left or right, is not warm. So Lotfi was troubled by this. He said, how can we be sure where the endpoints of this interval are? It might be one interval for you, one interval for you, one interval for me. It won't necessarily be the same. However, there ought to be some interval that we're all in agreement about warm. And so he kept the degree of similarity to warm water as 1, but then he tapered it off. And although this may seem like a simple concept, when he did this, he began to change everything, because now he could talk about sets that broke away from Aristotle and Cantor, where either you were in it or you were not in it. Instead, you could be in the set warm water to different degrees of similarity. What's warm to you may be somewhat warm to me. But he went farther. He recognized that we don't necessarily know where the endpoints, there's a point or two. Oh well. Where the endpoints of that right-hand set are. And so he allowed uncertainty. And this green region is something that we call a footprint of uncertainty. Now, you can weight all the values in that uniformly, or you can weight them non-uniformly. Zadeh introduced these 3 departures from crisp sets. And he laid the foundation then for a very, very large field. So that was his first major intellectual contribution. And I just have another example, because now just instead of talking about warm water, I want to put it in alignment with other terms that we might use. But again, we don't really know where the break point is between cold and cool and warm, etc. And so what Lotfi's idea was, well, what we'll do is we'll overlap them. There'll be some regions where simultaneously you can be in cold or cool or warm. This violated everything that we learned from Aristotle. Aristotle said, no, either you're in one set or you're not. You can't be in 2 things simultaneously. But Lotfi broke that. He changed the way we think about things. I think was it you or somebody mentioned, maybe it was Norm, that there was a lot of hostility to this idea, especially in the West. Western science and mathematics rests on Aristotle. The good news for him is that in China and Japan, people already were in tune with the concept of simultaneously being in more than one thing. And the yin and the yang is a very good example of this. That is, each of us has some male, some female, okay? And that probably was the reason why fuzzy sets caught on so quickly in the East. So here's a timeline for sets. And in my opinion, he's right up there with Aristotle. see that thousands of years ago, Aristotle was the guy who invented bivalent logic, and Cantor was the one who first formalized set theory. And then there were some other very important people who got into sets also. And then Zadeh came along and deserves to be among these greats. Now, here's his second major technical contribution, something called linguistic variables. Okay? I mean, what are these fuzzy sets good for? What do you do with them? So he had, 10 years later, a very, very important three-part paper where he brought together a lot of stuff, including this thing called linguistic variables. Variables whose values aren't numbers, but they could be words or sentences in a natural language. And his motivation was that when you use words, sentences, things are less specific. And the kinds of problems he was interested in. By the way, when he first got into fuzzy sets, he was not interested in engineering applications. He was interested in other big things, societal, as an example. So as an example, modern linguistic terms, suppose you have the variable pressure. So you can take pressure, you can create a bunch of terms for it. Terms I've used here, a weak, low, low, base, strong, high. You can choose different names for them. Then each of them has a degree of similarity, a membership function associated with it, and because you don't know really where they end, they overlap. So what do you do with these things? Well, okay, so now we come to his third intellectual achievement, introducing fuzzy sets into logic. So let me explain what that means. I think you all know that logic is the science of reasoning, and I think when we all learned logic, either something was true or it was false. Okay? And one of the most important representations of logic are rules. If this, then that. I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's two rules. If a man is short, then he will not make a very good professional basketball player. If water temperature is too hot, then turn the faucet handle somewhat to the right. Now here's the problem with logic. I'm going to call it crisp logic. It's very brittle. What do I mean by that? What I mean is if you have a rule in crisp logic, you have to match the antecedent 100%, or the rule doesn't fire. Okay. And this troubles Lotfi. He said, wait a second. What if I know that we have a man that's under 5 feet tall? Now, under 5 feet tall is similar to a man as short. But because it doesn't match 100%, the rule's not going to fire. I get nothing at the output. And so what he did is he modified logic to fuzzy logic so you could handle things that were similar to the front end or the antecedent of a rule and get some useful output at the end. And then what you could do is you could collect all your rules into a rule base and turn that into a fuzzy logic system. And I think it was you, Fred, who mentioned that when you are driving your car, for example, now American manufacturers will never mention that they have a fuzzy transmission system or a fuzzy this. Fuzzy is not a good word even today in the United States. But if you look at the patents from Ford and General Motors, etc., there are hundreds that use fuzzy logic. Hundreds. So I like this one. In his modesty, he said, well, I knew it was going to be important, that much I knew, but I never dreamed it would become a worldwide phenomenon. And indeed, it did. Now, you know you've made it when there are cartoons, and there's even, or there was, a song group. I have one of their CDs, and they're called Fuzzy Logic. Yes, it's true. My favorite is this one down here, Professor of Fuzzy Logic. Now, Lotfi didn't fit that mold. A fourth major contribution of Lotfi was something that he called computing with words. In 1996, he published a seminal paper that had a very intriguing title, Fuzzy Logic Equals Computing with Words. So I'm reminded of the song by Peggy Lee, those of you who are old enough to remember Peggy Lee. The title of that song was, Is That All There Is? Okay, and the title of this paper would lead you to believe that, well, if you know fuzzy logic, then that's the same as computing with words. That's not what he meant at all. What he meant is that there was this area that he had now labeled computing with words that really went back to his much earlier work in the 1960s and 70s, where he published in the linguistics literature and other related literatures, where he explained in great detail how fuzzy sets could be used in non-engineering applications. And I'll leave that for you to read. So he had a few rationales to this computing with words. One is use words when numbers are not known or are too costly to obtain. There you have to use words because you don't have numbers. Second is words are good enough. And let me give you an example. You know, is it more informative to say, well, these two things are correlated to 0.7687? Or is it more informative to say that these two things are fairly highly correlated? Okay, I think people understand the second approach. So there you may have numbers, but words are good enough. And then the last one is something called linguistic summarization. Okay, there you have to do it in terms of words. The area of computing with words actually is now grown, and in fact, Reza, you still around?
Yes.
Yes. I'm very fortunate. I have two of my PhDs. They sort of sandwiched my career. Fred was at the front end, and Reza was at the back end. I don't mean that literally, but
I suffered correcting that picture, by the way.
oh, you corrected it. Send me the PDF. I need it. Okay. So anyway, I'm not going to get into the details here. Let me talk about the impact that Zadeh has had on the field. You know, there's different ways you can measure impact. One of the ways that I like to look at a person's impact is I go to Google Scholar and I see how many times is this person cited. Lotfi is cited more than 181,000 times. Now, that's a staggeringly large number for those of you who don't follow it. It's like 9 sigma probably. His first 1965 paper, I've been told, is the most widely cited paper in all of AI, artificial intelligence. It's been cited more than 93,000 times. So I went on just yesterday and I Googled fuzzy sets with quotes around it, and it came up with 1.77 million results. The fuzzy logic, interestingly, has 9 million or more results. Tens of thousands of patents have been awarded, especially in Japan, the United States, and China. And I don't know how many journals have the word fuzzy. Lotfi would always send the members of the BISC, maybe once or twice a year, you know, a list of all the journals and how many have fuzzy in the title. And there's at least 30, 40, or 50 of them. And now there are annual conferences either totally devoted to fuzzy or that include many things about fuzzy every year. I have a proposal, and my proposal is that these things that we call membership functions should now be called Zadeh functions, and that fuzzy sets should be called Zadeh sets. I don't like the word fuzzy at all, and I know that Lotfi struggled with what should he call it, and he called it fuzzy, and one outcome of that is that many people laughed and ignored it because fuzzy does not have a well-respected technical ring to it, certainly in the West. And there are many things in mathematics that are called by the person's name, And I know that Lotfi was extremely modest, okay, but I think the time has come now that he should be honored by these things who should bear his name. So I found that also on the internet. That brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you.
So, I guess we have slipped a little bit on the time scale, but we'll try to move it a little faster. So the next speaker, there are two speakers. One is Dr. Farrokh Ashrafi, representing Fanni Union, and Dr. Fini, representing APSIH. So, I don't know, I guess you have
Please slide that.
Go ahead.
This is for slide.
Good evening, everybody. I'm honored to be one of the speakers in here and pay tribute to Professor Zadeh. My talk will not be as kind of education, like professors, about theoretical and fuzzy set and things like that. Mostly, I'm going to go through some relationship that we had with Professor Zadeh. First of all, we're gonna be hearing a lot of, a lot of times the word Fanni. Fanni is a Persian word for technical. So at the university in Iran, the oldest university in Iran that was teaching engineering is called School of Engineering, and the word for this Fanni. So sometimes when I say Fanni, that means School of Engineering, University of Tehran. So, and as everybody was mentioning in here, Professor Zadeh was so modest and kind that although he graduated from the same university long time ago, or maybe not so long ago, so that he always treated the university and the alumni of that university with respect, and always, as we see that he accommodated us, so and attended our reunions and things like that. Okay, little history. For the first time that I heard the word Professor Zadeh or his name, it was in 1962 when I was a sophomore student at the University of Tehran at Fanni, and our professor, who was also dean of the School of Engineering at that time, Professor Reza, he mentioned Lotfi Zadeh and his remarkable achievements in engineering and science and math. So if you notice, in 1962, still fuzzy logic concept was not introduced by Professor Zadeh, but he was still very famous, so that in Iran, everybody knew about him, that he is going to achieve some big things. So that was my first introduction. And Professor Reza at that time, he mentioned Professor Zadeh among some others, but of course, Professor Zadeh was on top of the list. And he emphasized to us that we should be, all of the Fanni students should be proud of these fellow alumni, especially Professor Zadeh. Now, I learned more about Zadeh when I came to US for continuing my education, and this is the book that Professor Mendel showed, that was the first book that I was introduced to, and it is very mathematical but precise. So it's not nothing fuzzy in it, but it is laid all the concept and theories of the state space concept is described in that book. It's kind of classic book. Now, when this Fanni reunion, which is essentially alumni association of the students from University of Tehran, School of Engineering of University of Tehran was formed. That was around, I think, 1994. We started in our publications, in our newsletters, to introduce some of the prominent people that graduated from that university. And the first thing that we did was in our newsletter number 3, we kind of wrote a short article about Professor Zadeh and congratulated him for receiving IEEE Medal of Honor at that time. So also this award was given to him for his pioneer work that he has done in the fuzzy logic area. Now, in an interview with the editor of the IEEE Spectrum, that this article was written in there, this editor of that article wrote that about describing the Zadeh's transition from undergraduate work that he has done in Iran to the graduate work that he started at MIT. And he said that it's quoted probably from Professor Zadeh, because I saw some other places also he has said the same thing, that MIT, it turned out, was an easy ride after the demanding coursework Zadeh had faced in Tehran. So actually this was this rigorous coursework, and some of it was too much theoretical and mathematical, and that was the reason the students were complaining. And our professor at that time explained that with this kind of hardship that I'm giving you, you're going to be following the footsteps of those people like Zadeh and things. So this is what the editor wrote in there. And also, it was in July of 2001 that for the first time I met Professor Zadeh, and that was at our first reunion of the University of Tehran School of Engineering. It was in San Diego, California. So I was very impressed because that was first time that I see him, and I knew that he is a very high-ranking scientist and famous person. But I was impressed that I saw that he has very pleasant demeanor and also very kind and really friendly. And that was a very good impression that he had with me, and also with all of the other alumni of the University of Tehran that were there. And I see that he probably was thinking about the time that he had in Tehran as an undergraduate. As you know, that for those people that go in repetition of undergraduate classes and then graduate and PhD, things that you remember most of the time is the thing that the time that you spent in undergraduate, because that is most of the actions happening at that time. So I think that was, he was kind of remembering the good time that he had when he was in University of Tehran. And at that reunion that we had over there from Iran, Dean of the School of Engineering, and also 2 professors also attended over there. And Professor Zadeh was a keynote speaker in that reunion, and he mostly didn't talk too much about theories and things like that, but he started to talk about his memories and his biography and other things, and talking about professors that he had at that time. He mentioned actually Professor Riaz's name. I think he was his favorite, and so essentially recalled all those memories from a long time, and he felt that he is between friends. And Professor Zadeh actually in those speech that he had as a keynote speaker, he stated that because of the strong mathematical education that he received at Fanni, graduate work at USA was quite easy for him and allowed him to undertake difficult mathematical challenges later in researches that he was pursuing at US universities. So that's kind of, I paraphrase, I don't remember exactly what he said, but that was essence of what he mentioned over there. Also, another thing is that Professor Zadeh, when he was a student at Fanni, I think when he was maybe second year or third year student, he wrote an advanced mathematical manuscript about 50 pages. It's in Farsi language. I think that's the only probably publication that he has, which is not necessarily published, but it is, he has given a copy of it to Professor Aminzadeh, and he provided us that manuscript, and it is in our website. It's installed in our website. That work over there is mostly original, his own work, all about mathematics and higher mathematics and advanced mathematics. And later we became very happy, extremely happy when Professor Zadeh decided, when Professor Zadeh was selected for the Benjamin Franklin Medal in Electrical Engineering. That was in 2009. So we wrote again in our newspaper a pretty detailed article and explained about Professor Zadeh and his pioneering work on the fuzzy system, and also about the prestigious Benjamin Franklin Medal, and also we congratulated him sincerely for his achievements. Actually, a team representing the School of Engineering and also its alumni association from Iran, they attended the award ceremony, and they presented their own prizes also to Professor Zadeh at that event. Among those people that were in the team that came from Iran was Dean of the School of Engineering and also Chairman of the Electrical and Computer Engineering. They were there. This is a picture that they have taken over there, and as you see on the right is the Dean of School of Engineering, and on the left is Chairman of the Electrical and Computer Engineering, and in the middle is Professor Zada and his wife. And then in one of our reunions, it was in I think 2010, October 2010, that we always, our reunion is being celebrated around October or September, because that is the date that the University of Tehran was open. So that's why we take that date. So Professor Zadeh informed us that he's going to attend our reunion, and he came there. At this event, Professor Zadeh first talked about his autobiography, some pictures from his childhood and when he was young, and some pictures from when he was in university. And his famous picture that he has is in a room sitting and with the word alone in Russian written in there. So he talked about his student life and praised the alumni of the University of Tehran for ranking very high in educational institution outside Iran. Those students that come to continue their education outside. And in the second part of his talk, also Professor Zadeh introduced the fuzzy logic and its application in the industry. At this event, FRF, that means Fanni Union Foundation or our association, we announced that our next international paper competition, this is one of the programs that we have, and in order to encourage students to do independent research, will be in the honor of Professor Zadeh, and on the subject of practical applications of fuzzy logic and computing with words. And we had, I think, a series of the reviewer that reviewing those papers and eventually awarded the prizes. I think Professor Aminzadeh was one of them. This is a picture taken at the reunion. Essentially, that's board of directors of the Fanni Reunion Foundation. Everybody is there except me because at that time I was traveling overseas in Iran, so I'm not there. This is another picture, sitting and listening probably to some programs at the same event. And Professor Zadeh, when he returned to Berkeley, he wrote a nice email to our chairman of the board, Dr. Zadeh, and as we see here, he expressed that he really enjoyed the program and he was happy that he could attend this in this reunion. And I just read one line from it. It says, "I always carry with me very fond memories of my student days at Fanni. I enjoyed the opportunity to meet you and chat with you." So that means that in here he explained that, as I mentioned, that his undergraduate times, he still remembers them and is fond of them. Now, in 2012, 2 years later, we in our reunion, we announced the winners of those paper competition and awarded them with the cash prizes and recognition. And Professor Zadeh couldn't come to that. He was planning to come, but he couldn't come. But he kindly sent us a message of the encouragement, and this message is given in here. Again, I'm not going to read all of it, but some important point in here. It says that Fanni was then and continues to be a premier institution in its field. When I came to the United States in 1944 and became a graduate student at MIT, MIT was easy by comparison. What I have achieved, I owe in large measure to the influence of rigorous training which I received at Fanni. Fanni has always occupied and will continue to occupy a very warm spot in my heart. To my fellow graduates of Fanni, I should like to extend my warmest greetings and best wishes. Actually, he is being very modest because it's not just what the institution provides for you, but hard work and interest that you have is also, it is probably primary. You have to have those foundation, but primarily is his own personality and character that got him to this point. Now, in next slide, we're going to see Professor Zadeh, a group of Fanni alumni. This was taken in September 2014. I think Professor Aminzadeh mentioned about that the year that Professor Zadeh came in here to USC, and his picture taken with some of the students. All of these students are graduates of the Fanni, and this is picture taken with Professor Zadeh. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to show again another picture of the Fanni with a couple of other, not couple, maybe 3 other graduates of University of Tehran. All of these people are very, very prominent in the world, and they are, as you see here, if you look from left to right, on the left is Professor Rahmat Samii, which is a professor of the UCLA. And then we have Dr. Etemad, which was also a famous person, and Professor Zadeh, and Professor Reza, which is also an academic person. Now, in here, I have a little video from Professor Zadeh that he's speaking in his own language about the University of Tehran, and let's see that how I can activate that.
where is that thing that they have to push to go? Oh yeah, wait.
Do you remember Farsi?
برای من صحبت کردن به پارتیقل بشکجی فهمیدن و خواندنش بلده. من دیپلمه دانشکده فنی هستم.
باید خوب فارسی صحبت کنیم.
معذرت میخوام. باید Saeideh. I extend my greetings to students and professors, especially at Danish Fanni, from which I got my degree. And that was the old times, but I always have very fond memories of those days that I spent as a student at Danish Fanni. It's a great institution, and my understanding is that it's still a great institution, produces outstanding students. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So this is a little that I discussed about how he handled or he interacted with us. I'm sure that because he was so modest and I mean, in heart a good person, I think he has done the same thing for the other universities that he attended and other people that he was in contact. Thank you very much.
All right, next we will have Dr. Fini from ASCII.
Good evening, everyone, and it's truly an honor to be here. My name is Saeideh. I'm an assistant professor at Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering Department at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm also the president of Association of Professors and Scholars of Iranian Heritage. So, or abbreviation would be APSIH. So, on behalf of APSIH, it's my privilege to be here tonight to remember Dr. Lotfi Zadeh and with a great gratitude and respect. So Dr. Zadeh has been one of the most important thinkers of the current time. And as we all know, he has had several great ideas that have impacted and will continue to impact the life of many others. Given the wide application areas of fuzzy logic, we all know that Dr. Zadeh is one of those rare scientists that not only has founded a new theory, but also has had a significant impact on industrial success of a lot of applied ideas that came out of that theory. So Dr. Zadeh not only has been a great scientist, but also a great teacher. I actually was reading an article about him last night, and there was a sentence in the article that caught my attention. So it was written that Dr. Zadeh has had a special gift in describing problems from an interesting angle and looking at the problems in an entirely new way. Being a teacher myself, I can testify that how that skill set is critical for just being able to really explain the problem or rephrase the problem from an interesting angle is really critical in inspiring students and in encouraging them and exciting them about the problem. So Dr. Zadeh's impact will continue for sure on the life of thousands of students and scholars that he has inspired through his lifetime. In Iranian community, we have had many successful people in the US and around the world, and in various areas, science, technology, business, government, and so forth. In Association of Professors and Scholars of Iranian Heritage, we are proud of them, and we truly strive every single day to keep their legacy alive. And this has happened through various supports that we offer to students and scholars, Iranian students and scholars, through financial and non-financial support. In APSIH, we have a tradition that every year in around May, we celebrate renowned Iranian scientists and scholars and highly achieved students. In more than 10 years ago, the board of APSIH at the time selected Dr. Zadeh to be the receiver of the Achievement Award, and he accepted the invitation and he came down for the event, and that was held at UCLA, and also he gave a talk to the audience for about 200 audience, and mainly students, undergraduate, master, and PhD students who were graduated at that year, and they were honored at the event. And we are truly thankful for that. I really believe that Dr. Zadeh has left something for all of us, either through his technical work or through his life, and I want to thank him for that. Thank you very much.
So I think the last item in agenda is a video message from Dr. Mojamshiri. Given the fact that we are running out of time and we have to leave this room, I have asked Cyrus to send a copy of that video to all the attendees. So hopefully you can watch that video in your leisure. And I would like to thank everyone for attending this memorial, and I wish you the best for all. Thank you.